Can South Korea turn the page on what has been its most turbulent time since democracy was
Lee Jae-myung is being sworn in as South Korea's new president.
Lee Jae-myung. Lee Jae-myung.
South Korea is often described as a vibrant democracy, a country that rose from the ashes of war to build a modern economic nation. But for many young people today, that democratic promise sometimes feels uncertain. More importantly, politics is really not easy to talk about here. So in this episode of Korea Deconstructed, I'm joined by 4 university students, young people who voted, who watched and who waited as South Korea held its most recent presidential election only 2 days ago. We know the winner. South Korea has a new president. His name is President Lee Jae-myung. And so in this episode, we're going to discuss what the election felt like to them, what it felt like to cast a vote, what they saw among their friends and on campuses, and perhaps more importantly, what was never said, what was that itch that was left unscratched. We'll explore the hopes, the contradictions, and the future. So this isn't news, this isn't a lecture, but it's about a conversation with some young people. I'm joined here first.
Hi, my name is Ray. That's my English name, and I am a student in Hanyang University. I major in policy studies, and I am very happy to be here today.
My name is Yoon-seo, and I'm from Seoul Women's University, and I'm majoring in journalism. Thank you for having me today.
Hello everyone, my name is Kwon, but I go by Andrew. I'm from Hanyang University at the International Studies major, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, my name is Jenny, and I study English in Seoul Women's University, and I'm very honored to be here today.
Let's start with this first question, which was on Tuesday this week. It was election day and a national holiday. And because it was June, the sky was blue, the weather was lovely, and everybody, you guys were off class, we were off work. Yoon-seo, let me start with you. What was election day like? What was the actual day like for you?
I was super excited to do my first voting for president because last time I was a minor by like 10 days. So I was like, oh my gosh. And like this time I couldn't really wait until June 3rd. So I did the early voting. And that day I was so happy to like be the democratic citizen in South Korea. And there were people who were like shooting 인증샷, which is like posting the stamp on their social media. And I did that too. And I was super happy with that. There were so much people who are avoiding or even exaggerating certain colors, and that were very interesting to see.
So, I did early voting, just like Yoon-seo, and like the day of election day, to me, it didn't feel really too much special or extraordinary because I did early voting and I was in the library. But online, like things seem to be very, very different. As in, there were very much heated discussions around this topic about politics everywhere I accessed, whether Instagram, YouTube, whatever. And it was very interesting and concerning to see the discrepancy between the people's reaction in real life and in social media. That was my first impression.
For me, it was like a holiday that I get a day off from school and I get to spend the whole time with my family. And I actually went to vote with my entire family. So we live in a huge apartment complex and the polling station was right in front of our house. And I was also nervous because it was like officially my first time to vote for the president. And I kind of had this stupid question like, do I have to fold it twice or once? Or like, where do I fold it or whatever? And I was asking my dad. I was actually kind of like proud of the fact that people actually went and voted because like these days, especially for younger generations, they feel like they're lost and they're kind of sick of all the arguments and the fightings that are happening. So many of them choose not to vote. And I was actually proud of about the 80% rate coming out because I believe that the more we feel lost and the more we feel that democracy is fading away, we have to go and vote and tell to the politicians that we still have our power, we have the rights to vote. And if we don't vote, it's like we're giving one more reason for the politicians not to care about us. So yes, I was satisfied with 80%.
Present issues aside, I think it is a good thing that there's more voters actually in the polling booth. And definitely, as Jenny said, it's basically people exercising their right to participate in the change that's in the country, right? So that's how the whole Chopper-jipe, the candlestick movement started. And I basically see it as a continuation of that kind of mindset, like the people seizing onto their means of political potential.
I think a lot of the world was looking at South Korea like, does it still have trust in its institutions? There's a lot of fake news out these days. Yunso was saying earlier about the polarization, and you were mentioning it online. Do we trust democracy? Do we trust the way that this process is operated and run? And I think the really high turnout shows that Korean people still trust democracy. They still trust democratic institutions. They still trust the rule of law and the votes to be counted properly and all of this to be done, which I think is really important.
Obviously, we can't deny the high turnout rate is a good sign of a good democracy, right? But then we also have to take into account the fact that just mere number doesn't equal good democracy, because obviously everyone votes, but then we don't know with what mindset and with what motivation and to what purpose they were voting. So even if the number is high, the quality of it might not be aligning with the number that it seems to be. So we also have to focus our attention on enhancing the quality of democratic participation as well as voting.
How do you measure the quality of democracy, right?
Well, there's some measures, but I think is that one indirect measure is that as the society gets polarized politically, then the quality of it tends to be low because, well, I mean, it's self-evident because if there are only two options because it's polarized, then when you exercise your votes, you can't really vote in a way or vote to a person that really suits your political beliefs.
I agree, and it's not just the candidates, let's speak about them in a minute, but also the regional effect. You've probably all seen that map of Korea, and we talk about North Korea and South Korea, but there's also East Korea and West Korea, because the Korean peninsula, the southern half, was just divided with the east side being red and then the west side being blue, and sometimes how you vote is determined not just by how many parties there are, but whether you were born in Daegu or Gwangju. Yeah. Almost that regionalism is still really strong.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was pointing out is that when they vote, they don't vote on the basis of the degree or the measure of democracy. That's not the sole criteria. They vote. I'm not saying everyone, but like many people, as far as I know, vote on the basis of not democracy, but on other factors, such as regional factors, things like that.
Agree.
So.
What do you look at? This is really kind of personal and sensitive question. Maybe it's impossible to answer, but what are you looking for when you vote? Because you all voted, and like, what are you? Just please not a dictator, or please no much. It might be as simple as that. But when you do vote and you're choosing someone, what are you looking for?
For me, I think I kind of see the unity, how this candidate can unite people, because in Korea it's quite really divided and it's getting more and more worse. So I expect if the president, like if that candidate becomes the president, that person needs to know how to combine all the people and make them come together. So I think I seek for how that person can unite people.
There were four main candidates in the debate, and I want to try to talk about whether they represented Korea or what you wanted to see, because in other countries, there might only be two candidates. I think it's kind of interesting that Korea's presidential debate has four people up there, or sometimes it has five people up there, rather than just two. And this time there were no women. So in the presidential debates on the media coverage focused on, Lee Jae-myung was number one for the Democratic Party, Kim Mun-soo was number two for the Conservative, Lee Jun-seok was number four, I believe, wasn't he? And then Kwon Young-guk for the, I forget the name of the new party now, but it used to be the Justice Party. What's the name of Kwon Young-guk's party?
KDLP?
KDLP?
Democratic Labour Party?
Yeah, the Labour Party. So there were four candidates that you were kind of looking at. How did you feel about the candidates or the political spectrum, the identity of them? Did it feel like, yeah, we've got a genuine choice here, or was it just, it's blue or red, take your pick?
I think superficially it was like 4 people, but I think that it's always blue versus red in Korea. And some of the votes that gone to Lee Jae-myung or Kwon Young-guk was people that they really wanted their their beliefs to be like realized in Korea, but many people around me voted for like preventing the future that they don't want, other than like their ideal future or dreams. So it's like polarized.
I mean, I agree with her in a way that although there are 4 candidates, like 4 parties, but I think it really all just comes down to 2 parties competition, meaning that it's very hard for those 3rd and the 4th candidates to penetrate into the competition between them.
Were you surprised by Lee Jae-myung's performance compared to Kwon Young-guk? So Lee Jae-myung is sort of a new right candidate. He's Harvard educated, but he sort of appeals to men in their 20s and 30s primarily. And he got sort of 7%, 8% of the vote. And if he'd have combined with the Conservative Party, they might have, run it very close. And then Kwon Young-guk, who seems to be advocating more progressive policies about labor, about gender and things like that, barely 1%. Did the results of Lee Jae-myung and Kwon Young-guk surprise you, Ray?
Kwon Young-guk, it definitely surprised me because, I mean, it was below 1%, right? 1%, below 1%. And I was surprised by the fact that his vote was that low because I at least thought it would have been at least a bit higher. And for Lee Jae-myung, I also thought Lee Jae-myung would have gotten higher, like at least like 10%, but then it was below 10%. And so it was surprising, but not too surprising, I guess.
I think that last debate and his comments really hurt his appeal. Many people talking about that, but I agree that the really low turnout for Kwon Young-guk,
Right.
and even after the election, the Korea Times and papers that I write for, they're still featuring him and things like this, and I'm like, wow, this doesn't reflect Korea. It doesn't seem, but it's being pushed by the media. To me, that was kind of interesting.
I think Lee Jae-myung borrowed Kwon Young-guk's votes. I think there was a viral meme, like one man doing this, which means like in my heart I have Kwon Young-guk, but I had to vote for Lee Jae-myung in order for Kim Moon-soo to not win. And many of my friends were using.
So they were putting the number 5 on their heart
Yeah.
with his number and then holding it up a 1 forward.
Yeah.
That was actually my mom. Because I was like asking like my mom like why is Kwon Young-guk even coming onto election when he knows he's gonna get like 1% or lower than that. And my mom was like, oh, you know what, Jenny, I actually support Kwon Young-guk, but in order to prevent Kim Moon-soo being the president, I had to vote for number 1. So I was like, oh.
Very brave of you to share that. I think it's interesting, though, that we don't vote for what we believe in. This is no criticism of your mum, because I think a lot of the country might have been doing this, but we will never know what percentage of the country was holding their number 5 and putting their 1 forward. Was it just like 2%? Was it 20%? I think that ambiguity is really interesting for me. Andrew, any thoughts on the candidates, particularly these sort of lower 2 ones?
I mean, especially it's, in the spirit of democracy, it's kind of disappointing to see it being so highly polarized, especially. And just like Ray mentioned earlier about people being forced to choose for red or blue, it's like people are being forced into like a bandwagon scenario where they're actually voting for something they don't believe in. And that kind of piles on. So it becomes this wall that's like insurmountable to a degree. So I don't know if there is a solution to this, but I sure hope there is. That's all.
I've tried to encourage my students to, and people don't have to agree with me, that if you vote for a party that's going to lose, that's not wasting your vote. Don't be gaslit into saying that your opinions don't matter just because you're in a minority. I think
Every vote matters.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think it's not necessarily always good if we vote tactically or strategically, because we're creating an artificial representation of what people want, and then that's manipulated, and then we might even forget what we want. Like, this is what we truly believe, but we're going to do that. And so essentially we're creating a fake society. Jenny mentioned talking about politics with her mum. Now, this week, I've been told by my producers that I've not been allowed to wear blue, red, orange, yellow on air. And during photos for teams and organizations, we weren't allowed to hold up a V sign, which I normally do. How is it talking about politics in Korea? Like, amongst your friends, online, with your family, with your professors suddenly asking you about Eton soccer with a microphone in front of your face? Like, Karina, tell me about that political discussion.
On my campus, around my friends, it was super easy to talk about politics because we had basically similar ideas about like Korean society and politics. And in my family, we talk about politics quite a lot, but sometimes my dad and me have different opinions on like Korean society. So I tend to avoid like fightings. And I think I talk about political stuffs a lot because of my major, because it's basically about newspaper and news kind of stuff. So almost all I'm thinking of is the news thing. So I talk about it with my friends, with my boyfriend as a small talk or something like that.
I was about to say the opposite, with my opinion.
Yeah.
Even though my major is international studies and we do deal with international politics and just politics in general, agreeing with you, so it is easy to bring up politics with my friends. So we talk about politics every day. It's quite depressing, really. But there comes a point, especially in election season, where it's hard to like, hey, who'd you vote for? It's like you just nudge, but they don't budge at all. And in one ways, I do think it's kind of like them respecting like our boundaries as friends. But in another sense, it does feel kind of like, this is an aspect of the times that still hasn't changed. So, it's something that I personally have a gripe with. Yeah.
It's in the celebrity culture as well, isn't it? You don't get sort of Kanye West or Taylor Swift saying
Endorsing
it. Do you? How do you see this? Because I see celebrities as very apolitical here.
Yeah, especially in Korea with the Karina incident. I think it ties into the whole Korean society viewing celebrity as like modern day idolatry, as I called it. So they're supposed to be this perfectly apolitical, just bastion of like modern day virtues. And if they stray away from that, whether left or right, they're just immediately torn down. So, yeah.
So you find it hard to people to actually say they talk about politics, but they don't give their political opinions as much.
Not just about politics, just anything that characterizes themselves as like outside of the fold, I would say. Yeah, it turns into controversy.
For me personally, it is really hard and sensitive to talk about politics. So I kind of always avoid talking about it because I especially love peace. I just value the peace that I have. So I don't really want to fight or argue with someone. So, and I was actually very open at first to talk about politics. I was ready to listen, I was ready to discuss, and I was ready to like share my opinions and listen to others. But what I got in return was all like anger and emotional like reactions to that. They were kind of busy about defending their candidates and attacking others. And when we reach that point, it's not about politics anymore. It gets pretty personal. And if you criticize that politician or candidate, that is an attack to the person who supports them. So I think I just try to avoid each single political conversation in daily life.
Except this podcast, which is why I want to make sure that people understand that, getting young people to come and talk about politics, it might seem natural and easy for people in other parts of the world, but here it's very difficult, I think.
I completely agree with her point, but like I've been trying to think whether or not if this is really fear, right? And I came to a conclusion that it's not fear particularly, but it's just about being careful and avoiding unnecessary conflict. And So it could be about discernment, and it could also be about being hesitant, I would say. That's an accurate word. And on why it exists, I do believe that politics now, especially now, is that one's political belief is one's identity, and it's completely conjoined together. That's what just she said, and I think it's very, very hard to escape that at this point, because as time goes by, especially in Korea, we're seeing it much more frequently that the identity politics and the populism it just abounds around Korea, and I think it's one of the major problems that we must address, or we're gonna have trouble.
How do you see identity politics in modern Korea? Because I think it means different things in different parts of the world.
Right. So in Korea, identity politics, I would describe it as a populist politics. It's very akin to populist politics in a way that your political identity is immediately attached or grafted onto your party's identity. So they're a group of people united under that political belief in the political party that they represent, and it kind of works as a totality. It's a bit totalitarian. It's not the same mechanism, but they share the totalitarian mindset in a way. And that's what I mean by identity politics. So it's that rather than being logical and rational and deliberative in delivering democracy, what they do instead is they just split the side and they choose either one or the other. If it's not one, then it's the other. If it's not the other, then it's one. It's sort of like that, right? It's a dichotomy that's the real problem of this identity politics that I describe as populism, I guess. And it's done systematically by the politicians.
I completely agree. Because if you criticize the Democratic Party, for example, on something, maybe something they've done or a candidate, people will assume that you're a conservative, and therefore you agree with everything that Conservative Party.
Right.
Or if you're a Democratic Party supporter and you say, well, I kind of agree with this idea over here, then you become pigeonholed, and it doesn't allow the complexity that exists inside people to want a little bit of that, and I agree with that, and I don't like this, and we're nuanced and we're grey and we have all of these things, but we're painted as either blue or red, and that becomes very difficult, I think.
Yeah, and I want to add on to it is that I personally think that there is no one ultimate truth that encompasses everyone. There's no one belief that encompasses everyone's identity, meaning that they can unite on the surface to a certain degree, but ultimately they can't be. And if people force people to be united under one totalitarian belief, then what we're going to witness is something like the Soviet Union of the early 20th century and the Nazis. And so...
Or North Korea right now, perhaps.
Exactly,
Kim Il-sung.
precisely. And so I do believe that we need a discerning eye and the ability to really contemplate on whether I'm making this political decision based on my true belief, or I'm making it based on this inevitable situation that I have to vote on one side and not the other.
I think this is a really good point that Ray's bringing up. When you looked at the election, guys, we spoke about this before, what was the itch that you were looking for? What really matters to you? What are your beliefs? Because people voted, and they voted red or blue in large numbers. But for you as young Koreans, when you think about politics and modern life here and your identities, what really matters to you? Like, what do you want people to be talking about?
Long answer, yeah. Short answer, no. But long answer is, especially, I mentioned the campaign promises earlier. Yeah. But a lot of the number one campaign promises were resolution of the current situation. And I feel like we're past that now, especially today, like in the first day of the new presidency. And it just felt like they were addressing the elephant in the room and refusing to see anything else besides it. So it's, in a sense, it becomes, are they just relying on that elephant in the room as their primary campaign promise to facilitate voting? So,
what's the elephant, Andrew? And what do you see apart from the elephant?
Elephant in the room is, of course, the martial law fiasco that happened. And now that we're past it, we have to focus on rebuilding what was lost during that situation and how to improve Korea. Because, like, how I see it is, some of the more pressing issues are fertility, unemployment, education, but none of the candidates really relied on those campaign promises to further their campaign themselves. So I see it as, again, it's forcing people to see, oh, there's an elephant coming this way. We have to get out of the way. But what comes after? And so, yeah, it felt, like you said, it felt like pigeonholing to a sense.
So for you, it's education, employment, fertility rates. These are very important issues that...
And they were under-addressed.
I was pretty disappointed with Lee Jae-myung's 군 호봉제 because as a woman, I didn't really felt equal to men being able to go to military service and they serve and they get benefits from it. But when women just volunteers to go into the military service right now, we could not really have the bank account benefits or 군 가산점 or kind of stuff. We couldn't really get that. And the 군 호봉제, which was a very similar thing about like there was a similar thing before in Korea, but that was canceled because it was not really fair for men who couldn't really go to military service, disabled people, or they have reasons. So if they get to have a high score on the test for certain exam, but they couldn't really get the most highest score because they couldn't really serve in military, that wasn't equal to men who couldn't really go to military. So they said no to that law, so that law canceled, but he's bringing that again. That's not fair, I think.
Did you feel... This is a very personal question. You don't have to answer it. Is your boyfriend still doing military service?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so but it's important. It's the lived realities, right? There were no female candidates or anything like that. Do you feel that gender was appropriately discussed? Because a lot of media focuses on gender. I'm not sure how you viewed this presidential campaign through that. There were no female candidates for the first time in a long time.
I was kind of disappointed with the fact that there were no female candidates, first of all. And last time it was the battle between like kind of male and female with like Lee Jun-suk made Yoon Suk-yeol say that we should like cancel the 여성가족부 and all the feminists should be cancelled or kind of stuff. And Lee Jae-myung was kind of against as a strategy. And now that Lee Jae-myung wants to combine as many voters, he didn't really said much thing about female rights. So I was kind of disappointed that he used female votes for his win, but he didn't really paid off to female voters.
I think having no female candidates was... I didn't really have like super big feelings about it, but I do feel it's important to have some women candidates. So, because we always say that these days gender should be equal, and it's actually an equal society. But actually, if you look deep inside, the system and how you get the candidate is not really fair to the woman to be an actual candidate. So, and also when people actually see those candidates on TV, they always see men, and they actually unconditionally think that men should be the president. So I think like having variety of gender is also important.
South Korea, very well said. South Korea was the first country in East Asia to democratically elect a woman. It's done this before France. It's done this before the United States. Very long-standing democratic countries that have failed to do this in centuries, and South Korea has done it. What's interesting, normally when women are elected in democracies, normally they do so on a kind of a masculine image. They do it for a conservative party. They wear pantsuits. I'm generalizing very much here, but normally when women are elected, they're for a bosudang or a conservative party, and it's much harder to get a liberal woman in charge, I think.
Speaking of military service,
Yeah.
first of all, props to all people, everyone who served in the military or who is currently serving in the military. Props to all of you.
Live here.
Korea is Korea because of you guys. And you guys deserve all the respect and love.
That's why we sleep safely. Yeah, no, I agree with that. That includes Yoon So's boyfriend, who's doing it now, keeping us safe. Yeah.
Everyone.
As someone who's already finished their military service, I didn't really focus on the military, the 호봉제, as you mentioned it, because all in all, it's quite controversial, right? That's why it was removed in the first place. But I think we're stepping in the right direction in terms of gender entering into the political arena. Not so much that it's like an underrepresentation of men and women in Korea, but I do think that there's aspects to improve upon, as our female colleagues here mentioned today. It's all about representation, right? So if there's no female candidate, then it really does become a problem of, are women actually being represented fairly in Korean society? Yeah.
Sometimes we need diversity of identity, but also diversity of opinion. I mean, if you have 50% males, like with you guys, I've tried here to get diversity of gender, but also I try really hard to get diversity of opinion. I don't just want everybody that thinks the same. We need people that think differently, that act differently. That's really important. Does the international, I mean, Andrew, I might jump back to you first on this one, but international studies, international affairs, South Korea's position vis-a-vis Moscow and Beijing and Tokyo and Washington and Pyongyang, that seems to me a big difference between the blue and the red. I'm not sure how you guys see it, but generally I expect in South Korea, when the Red Party, when the conservatives are in charge, then there will be good relations with Japan and Washington, and you know, we saw all the singing in the White House. And when the Democratic Party, the current ruling party, are in charge, then we're going to see engagement with North Korea. We're going to see trips to Pyongyang. Every Democratic president has done that. Kim Dae-jung in 2000, Roh Moo-hyun in 2007, and then Moon Jae-in in 2017. And then maybe tense relations with Tokyo. How does the international affairs work on this? Is that important to you, Andrew?
I mean, as I believe it was today, but the current president, Lee Jae-myung, already announced his plans for foreign diplomacy. And he did mention that he was working on closer ties with China, opening talks with North Korea again. And he did criticize the previous administration's stance on Japan as being too lax. So we can already see what kind of direction he plans on taking diplomacy to. And basically, I do see the foreign diplomacy from both standpoints, from red and blue. But it all boils down to, if foreign diplomacy is so entrenched in political views on the left and right, then how does Korea face itself? How do we move forward in 10, 20 years? Or do we move forward at all?
I agree with you saying that when the Conservative Party takes the place of the president, then we get to be a little bit close to US or Japan, and Progressive Party makes president, then we become relatively close to China or North Korea. And I felt like, this is a bit childish, but I feel like it's like a high-teen movie. Like the girls be like, boo, you voted for like Progressive Party, so you are basically 빨갱이, boo boo, doing that. Or or like for the Conservative Party, you are like 매국노, you sold the country for Japan, kind of stuff. And we cannot really say about political thing or the relationship between like international countries. It's just a fight between like, I don't like that, like black and white.
I mean, certainly it's Cold War II. Realistically speaking, I mean, Cold War I was between the Soviet Union and the US, but now it's US and China, right? And like a few weeks ago, I read a book about this situation, about these international relationships and stuff, and the biggest difference between the previous Cold War and the Cold War now between U.S. and China is that, as opposed to the past, now U.S. and China, on the surface, they look like they're against each other, right? But then now, because the economy, society, and the politics is so interconnected now in a globalized society, they actually do maintain at least a bit of relationship between them, and because they need it, and they can't live without each other because of their such big influences. And so, if Korea kind of veers towards, leans towards one side, then it could be in trouble in a way, because on the surface we're thinking, okay, we're an ally with this side, but then on the side that we don't know, they might be conspiring against not necessarily us, but like something that is against us. And so I think we do have to be careful of that. And I do believe that the international relationships and diplomacy has to be concentrated more cautiously. Yeah.
Completely agree
And-
that
and
in the
focus cautiously,
past, the Cold War, they were divided, and athletes didn't go to the other nations' Olympics and things like that. The Cold War was geographical, and it was it really bordered people off. But these days, we talk about this Cold War, but what's his name? Isho Speed has gone to. He's going all around China, and he's super popular, and all the Chinese is great. All the memes, and Chinese students will want to go to America, and this is still happening on a day-to-day basis. North Korea, right? I'm sure there will be opening up and engagement with North Korea. I'm sure Lee Jae-myung wants to do it. Whether he can do it, Trump might just bypass him completely and go straight to Kim Jong-un, and Lee Jae-myung might find himself a bystander. But how do you feel that South Korea's political stance might be opening up to Pyongyang a little bit more now?
How do I expect, or how do I feel?
How do you feel about what might be coming? Do you expect that to happen? Do you think that will happen? Do you feel that...
It's kind of hard to say,
Yeah.
considering everything. But I do expect at least a couple of encounter between Kim Jong-un and Lee Jae-myung. But do I agree with it? I don't know. I don't think so.
I think during Moon Jae-in's administration, it was we saw and heard Kim Jong-un more than we ever had previously. He was always this kind of enigmatic figure, excuse me. He was an enigmatic figure that you saw in memes with his daughter in his leather coat. But when he was with Moon Jae-in, you heard his voice, you saw him more, you saw him walking. So that will probably change a little bit, I'm sure.
As South Korean, okay, some people might be against or towards having an appeasement, kind of appeasing relationship between North Korea, right?
Sure, yeah.
And personally, I'm against it. But even besides that, I mean, if you look at North Korea, right, from a humanitarian perspective, right, I'm not looking at it between the dichotomy of the North Korea and the South Korea, but I'm looking from the outside just as a human, okay? So North Korea and their policy and what they do to oppress their own people, and the totalitarian and authoritative and completely, absolute no regard for the human rights and everything. And that alone can win my liking towards him. And so, yeah, so I do think that we don't always have to look at North Korea from the South Korean people's perspective, but just as a human, right? And it's also very different to hate with all your heart, to hate North Korea as a whole, but just to hate Kim Jong-un and the political authorities, but to have at least a bit of sympathy towards the ordinary citizens in North Korea. And I do think we have to separate them and clarify the boundaries of your emotion or your personal stance towards them. Yeah. I think it's really, really important.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it should be possible to be a supporter of the Conservative Party in South Korea, but also favour engagement with the North, and by the same token be a supporter of the Democratic Party, but also find North Korea's regime untenable.
Absolutely.
Because that dividing line is, when you ask someone about North Korea here, it's almost like, are you blue or you red?
Absolutely.
But I think, as we've discussed, sometimes people are complex and nuanced, and how you view North Korea is kind of like a very personal thing. My friend Rani has said this to me recently, a Lebanese scholar. She said, because I'm human, nothing human in the world is alien to me. And there are, elements of North Korea that are incredibly human. But the government system and the control Very different. I agree.
So people hate, I mean, not just hate, but like condemn and criticize the Soviet Union and the Nazi Hitler and everything. Any totalitarian regime, Mao and everything. We can't look at North Korea in the same manner as you look at them. I mean, if you're not Korean, we would be looking at it the same way with the same criteria.
Yeah.
So, I want to add that.
I had this is a true story though. I had a meeting with the Ministry of Unification. The Tongilbu asked to meet me. Yeah, it's a true story. And I met with a couple of scholars, and this was about a month before martial law. So this was November 2024. And we were there, and these were incredibly smart young dudes, right? They were running the Tongilbu. They're like in their late 30s, 40s, obviously very clever, and they laid out all the human rights problems and why the people of North Korea deserve freedom. This was from the very conservative perspective. And I was like, yeah, I completely agree with you, because one of the best things in the world is you get to choose what to watch on YouTube. You get to choose your hair color. You get to choose who you meet and what you say. And I believe this freedom really empowers us, and we all want it in our personal lives, right? We don't want other people to choose our stuff. We like having choice. And if North Korean people have those choice, that's a really good thing. And then I also suggested to them that if you really believe for human rights in North Korea, how about human rights for people in South Korea as well? How about human rights in terms of things that are enshrined in the United Nations about gender and sexuality? Do you care about those ones or just those ones? And they looked at me like I was, and I was wearing a pink jacket and everything, and they were like, ah. But that was how I felt. I think that sometimes human rights are weaponized for political motives, and the North Korea issue becomes like that when there are humans there.
Yeah.
I just completely agree on what you guys said right now. I just feel like the politics that they talk about, being more friendly to China or being more friendly to Japan or North Korea or whatever, and I have a feeling that it's used to divide more people, because in real life, even if a country is not friendly to China, you have Chinese friends, and you're not gonna hate that person or something. In daily life, people actually are still connected. They still make a conversation. They are still friends, and this politics is just more dividing people into pieces, and and I always get really shocked whenever I talk to a really young kid around in their elementary school, and they're like, oh, I hate China, or I hate Japan, and I hate North Korea, and all those things, and that is made by those parents or some nearby adults, and they're hating someone that they don't really know because of those political fights and political opinions, and I feel very frustrated and very upset with that fact.
Education plays a big role in that, I think. I've seen very young people with very passionate views about anti-Japan and things like this, and they must learn it from school and textbooks and different places. Yeah. I want to, before I forget, can we do Produce 101, your idea, Jenny?
Yes.
Because I don't think this is on the record. I think we did this before we start recording.
Yes.
Tell us about Produce 101.
Okay, so Produce 101 is a program that you have to vote for your idols, and there's basically 101 people, and for the entire month or 4 months, they dance and sing in front of people, and people get to choose a lot. They can actually get to see how the candidates are like, and that's how they make the idol. But compared to the political election that we had, the presidential election, it's the president who works for a country, and he's gonna represent the entire country, and he can actually control the way how the country goes. But we only got 3 discussions for the president, and we just had to vote for it.
I'm going to try to make a short form with Produce 101, but I'm going to put Kim Mun-soo's head on some idols and Lee Jae-myung. But the thing that I love most about your idea, Jenny, and I've always thought this for the longest time, is I know lots of nice people in this world, and they would make wonderful leaders and wonderful presidents. They would make people, genuine people that I think work for the betterment of others, and they have a strong moral center, and they're not motivated by greed or power or selfishness too much. I know quite a few people like that, and it's not easy to be in the modern world like that. And I've always thought, why don't we have a system where we allow these people to rise up? During the election, there was so much talk about these candidates, how they arose from poverty, and they came out, this Haechones or Yeongnanda, and they worked in the labor unions. And I'm like, these guys have got millions of dollars. They walk around with bulletproof vests or in limousines. And I would love to have 101 candidates. I would love to be able to see the public and what they would choose when there was that amount of options. If you put, different people there, and all of a sudden you have the Gimbop Cheongguk Sajangnim as president or something like that, or I don't know. I think it's a very appealing idea, because I think rather than what we choose, I think the political system doesn't always give us the best possible options. There's a country of 50 million here. We choose between four. I'm like, can we have some more choices, please? That's often how I felt. And I think we should be doing better that way. What don't people like me understand about how the way you guys think and talk and speak about politics? So me as a foreigner, me as a professor, me as someone in their 40s, media, what don't people like me understand about the way you guys think about politics, feel about politics? Because when I see your video assignments and your work, I'm like, wow, your vibes are so different from me, and I love it. Is there something that we don't get about politics that you see?
I think the politics that like people in their 40s or 50s or 60s are focused is that they actually see economics as the most important thing, and kind of maintaining the power that they hold in the current situation, that they want to kind of be super effective and protect the way it is right now. And for the younger people, it's more like we want to see the bigger picture, because we need to live in the future. It's our country. It's going to be our country in the very future. So we want to have some policies or ideas that also reflect the future, not only the present moment. And I think they don't really reflect that much these days.
Just to add on to what Jenny just said, I do think that older generations tend to view, especially the president, as some kind of like a CEO, like a company head. So who we elect as the CEO will further this company economically, at least further. But younger people, especially because identity politics were mentioned before, it's like people see the candidates as a reflection of themselves. And so it's more so not choosing a CEO, but it's choosing somebody who represents me. And I was planning to go somewhere with this, but it's a reflection of the candidates are a reflection of us. So it's more so about politics being closer to our heart than the generations before us. And so I do think that discussions about politics are a bit more secretive among young people today.
I agree with Andrew, and I think that the vote itself being the identity for myself, just like Ray mentioned, I think that's the reason for that.
I like the idea that sometimes we choose a president as a CEO, somebody to manage the company, somebody to take things forward. And it's really interesting that Lee Jae-myung has kind of positioned himself, the president, I should say now, towards the center, towards the right. He's kind of, he's from the left. He's meant to have all these working policy parties, but he sort of said, I'll make the economy big, I'll make you rich again. And that's what he's done. We sometimes need and I'm not saying that the president is not, but we sometimes need a moral character, somebody that might not be the best accountant, but that he's a nice guy, or a nice woman. We might want someone who's not the fastest runner, but the best team player, or something like that. I think moral character counts for a lot. How does social media affect politics? Does it come up in your reels much? Does it affect? Do you look for it online? Do you because I'm sure our algorithms are different. Has social media affected the way you see politics or the way you vote, the way you see things?
I consciously refrain from it because I know how big of an impact that a social media can have on young people, to everyone, but like especially on young people, given that they don't really have a firm identity with regards to politics and like about the social life. And so I even in this period, I try to consciously kind of shy away or avoid it. But one thing that I always want to say is that people tend to think that the social media isn't reality. I don't think that's the case. I think social media is the reality. Because in Korea, when we discuss politics, it's very hard and difficult to really express your true thoughts of true political thoughts, or your true identity, wherever it may be. But in social media, like those things, whether it's good or bad or socially appropriate or not socially appropriate, they circulate, and it really abounds like in the social media because of the anonymity of the social media too. And so the real place in actuality where I wouldn't say genuine, but like actually true ideas get communicated is the internet social media world. And so that points to another point that I want to bring up, is that I think we need more rigor or control over the social media and the fake news and everything, because it is reality, as I say.
The real becomes fake, where everybody does like 빈말, 좋은 말씀, and then the fake place, the social media, you get some very
It's the reverse.
outrageous ideas, but interesting discussion about things that are not really said because it might be too dangerous, too close to the bone. On there, you also get, I've met like a couple of smart people, and what they tell me about like things that are clearly false, I'm like, wow, you've been on social media too much. Right. It's interesting to me, the effects of social media.
It's like we inhabit social media.
Yeah.
It is our world.
Agree, because we are anonymous on social media, so we get to be more honest. But the thing is, I think that there are like not so much of a medium voices, because on social media, radical voices are way much louder, so we get to see them very often. So I sometimes prevent myself from seeing too much social media and think of it as my opinion, because I have my opinion, but when I see like radical voices, whether like left or right or other side, I get to think that my opinion is like too medium stuff. So I get to tend to be like more radical because of the social media, not because of my opinion. So I get to be cautious about that.
Yeah. And also, like I've been thinking, is that okay? So everyone in Korea or in any democratic society, right? Everyone has a vote. It's an inalienable right, because you're the citizen of a country and you have a right to exercise your vote. It's a basic right, but the fact that you've been given the right implies that you also have your duty and a responsibility for participating in that political process, right? So it's not just about your right, but it's also about your responsibility. But the problem is, as the political discussion moves into social media, all they demand is their rights. They want to exercise their rights to freedom of speech, freedom of political discussion. But then where's your responsibility?
You should have the responsibility to know all the candidates' names, to have an idea of their policies. So if before you go to vote and you say to someone, what do you think of candidate 5? And they're like, who? That's kind of interesting. I agree with you. Go on.
It's not specifically voting right. It's also about voting responsibility.
I mean, just adding on to Ray's earlier point about responsibilities and linking it to social media, as we've just talked about, I do think that while social media does offer like a linked platform where everybody can participate in, regardless of where they're from, it also adds the potential of potentially leading you into like an echo chamber. So that's, especially nowadays with like algorithms, and you click one link, then it just becomes like a rabbit hole of the same ideas repeated over and over. And I feel like that does radicalize a significant portion of young people today, and
old people.
Old people too.
Yeah,
Just and old people too. I do see people, especially seniors on the subway, just consuming just shorts and shorts of political content. And so while social media does have the benefit of being widespread, it also has the detriment of being widespread. It's everywhere.
Exactly.
So, and harking back to Ray's point about social media being the reality, so where does the point become where you can just turn off your phone and forget about what you just saw if it's everywhere already? So, yeah, that's my concern, I'd say.
The interesting one day, if we have a digital president, we have virtual idols and things like this now, don't we? No, but we do. We have, and a lot of science fiction and things like this. Fallout series, they have virtual presidents.
I have an interesting thought. So you just mentioned digital president, right?
Yeah.
But I think Lee Jae-myung is, or anyone like in the world now, as long as you're in a modernized democratic society, the president that you have is a digital president to some degree. I mean, all of us who voted for Lee Jae-myung, we don't know him in person. We haven't communicated with him. We know him through internet because, I mean, how do we know him in person, right? And so what we know about the president and how we made him a president is, in a large part, influenced or determined by the process of social media that you consume every day. It is reality.
And I'm sure that political parties take big notes from entertainment companies and how they create parasocial relationships and things and bubbles and weverses and private messages. I got lots of phone calls and messages from political candidates like during this, and I'm sure they're creating this image that people that they consume online.
Yeah. It's like symbolic. I wouldn't say manipulation, but like symbolization of politics. I would say, but I mean, it's like symbolization of everything nowadays. But in politics, it intensifies.
When I see your Produce 101 idea is still going strong here, Jenny, we're still doing politics and K-pop. I've often thought about the idea, wouldn't it be nice, a virtual president, but it would just be, there is no president, just the people decide individually. Like, what shall we do, with this issue? And you all pick up your phone and you put it in, and like whatever the public decide, that's what that would be kind of scary. I often ask my students this question, like, do you trust your fellow citizens? Like, how do you feel about them? And sometimes they look at me and they go, democracy requires a lot of trust. It requires people to look at each other and do these things. Coming towards the end, I think, guys, is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything in my questions, or is there anything that, before we wrap this up, that you want to say about Korean politics, about the election, about the candidates, about this conversation? Is there something that you think should be said?
I think that the fundraise for Kwon Young-guk was quite interesting because there were not so much voting for Kwon Young-guk, but there were very high fundraising for Kwon Young-guk, and lots of young female Koreans showed respect for Kwon Young-guk by raising some funds, and that was quite interesting. Like, other than just voting, people had found another way to show their opinions.
Would you have accepted, it's very controversial and you don't have to answer it, I'll cut it out or something, but would you have accepted Kwon Young-guk getting 20%, but the Conservative Party winning?
Personally, yes. Like, I expected him, I didn't really think that he could win so much voting because of the circumstances, but I wished I could see him getting more votes.
I went on record and said something like that a couple of months ago, that, it would be nice if there was an option for a third party or a different way, not a party that wins the election, but that shows Korean people it's a viable alternative, because if you don't win this election, maybe in 5 or 10 years, you have a better standing of winning that, because you don't go from zero to president very quickly. So I was looking for that maybe something will happen, but the alternative seems to be Im Jun-seok and his party, because people have turned away or not voted for Kwon Young-guk. So the very few votes he got really surprised me, actually. But the money is something else, yeah.
For me, I think we also have to approach democracy and politics also in an international way, because I got to search about like US and think about the US, because US was always proud as like the number one democratic society. And as a Trump being the president right now, there was like riots, like people going into the parliament building and like breaking all those stuffs. And I realized that it's not like a phenomenon that's only happening in Korea, but also happening like worldwide. So I feel like it's kind of natural because people, as the social media fuels people to be more polarized, and actually the politicians wants people to be divided in order to gain power. So people kind of are trapped in this thought like us and we are the good ones and they, them are the bad ones. So they keep polarizing and they actually get blinded. So it's happening in Korea, but also happening in worldwide.
This just leads back into the earlier question about why I was disappointed in this election's candidates, and it does relate to what I believe to be the most pressing social issues in Korea. So this links to one of the previous week's episodes about the video by Kurzgesagt about Korea's over. And one of the pressing issues was the demographic collapse. And what really got me thinking in that episode was the demographic bell was shaped like a cup, so more old people, and that does lead into voting and votership turnouts. And so it got me thinking, if the future of Korea does proceed as that infographic does describe it, and there are more people who tend to vote more conservative, then is that actually the preservation of Korean democracy? Will it be maintained? That's my question.
There was a famed in ancient Rome. There was a sign that would say something along the. And I don't speak Latin well, but "Sexagenarian de ponte," which means throw the people over 60 off the bridge, which was the idea that okay, you've had your turn, now let's let the young people. But you're right to say that in this election and in many elections, old people tend to vote one way, and if South Korea becomes a very super aging society, like the projections suggest, it will become a society that votes conservative. The adage is, and this is not necessarily true, and some people might hate me for saying it, but if you're young and you're not progressive, you have no heart. If you're old and you're not conservative, you have no brain. And so people do, as they get more money, as you were saying with the 40s and 50s, you get more money, you get more stature and positions, and you want to keep things a little bit more. You become more afraid of change, and young people want that. So if you have a society where basically everyone's old, in a democracy, then yeah.
Rejoinder to Andrew's claim is, so obviously there's a huge gap between the demographics of Korea, right? The older and the younger generation. But the problem is, I think it relates to some part to political polarization. Is that, okay, so now two big oppositional parties in the political parties, right? The 민주당 and the 국힘. And usually the older people tends to vote for the conservative and the younger people for the 민주당, right? So it's not just about the opposition and the polarization of the political, but about the whole social, age, and economical even, right? So this polarization is not just a political phenomenon. It's a macro social phenomenon that we have to seriously address. And so yesterday, like in politics class, I had to read this literature about this democratic backsliding. So democratic backsliding is the idea that the democracy kind of dwindles, it kind of collapses naturally. It implodes, not explodes, but like it implodes, right? And there are three symptoms. First one is aggrandizement of the executive branch, and the second one is the oppression of the oppositional party, and the third one is the weakening power of the legislative branch of the Congress. And all three of them we have been witnessing very well in Korean politics, especially over the last 5 years. And although I am hopeful, and I do want to be hopeful for the Korean democracy and the Korean politics, I think in order to be hopeful and to actualize that hope in reality, we have to investigate what really went wrong and what we need to do as each citizen. And we have to aggregate our interests and unite it under the same purpose of preserving democracy and not just dividing people in dichotomy. Yeah.
Then let's talk about the future, because if we consider the past, the people that vote Conservative, they generally grew up under dictatorship, and they grew up under Park Chung-hee, and they grew up under a time of great economic vibrancy, from poverty to richness, and they also grew up under a Cold War with North Korea very much as that. And so that they vote Conservative is not necessarily because they're racist, they're dumb, they're stupid. It's because they lived through that, and those life experiences, not always, but tend towards this way. And young people who grow up with an interconnected world and social media and talk of human rights, cosmopolitanism, globalization, they grow up with different values. So our experiences and what we go through really affects how we view the world, how we'll vote. Ray suggests that the country needs to aggregate opinions because Korean democracy might be in trouble. How do you feel then about the future? There's a new president, there's a new start, we've got rid of that. As you look forward, are you like, yay, let's go Lee Jae-myung, or is it a bit more ambiguous, or the future, Yoon-seo?
I am expecting a better future for Korea now, because we have like a younger generation had experienced martial law, and we don't really feel it as a like history. We felt it in our life. So I think that more people are cautious about politics right now. So as I mentioned before, voting is trendy right now. It's super cool. And watching news is cool too, as I think with my friends. And as more people pay attention to the politics, like Jenny said in the beginning, the politicians would know that also they're cautious about political issues, so we should be more cautious about representing people or doing stuff. So I expect for the better, no matter what president we got.
Basically, I do agree with Ray's point about how the people should be at the forefront of deciding what democracy is and what Korea is as a country. And I also do remain hopeful, as Yoon-seo said, about the future, because now that we've experienced that and coming out of that as a young generation, it's no longer an issue from like the history books. We've seen it like firsthand, and it also has led to a trend in politics. But my only reservation about calling it a trend is I hope it doesn't stay a trend, because like trends do, they die down. And I don't want it to die down. I want people to actually, wake up. So this should be more like a wake-up call for people to actually participate actively in the political arena.
I would like to add something to that, which is that I think people need to trust youth more. I think when I look at politics, I think there's this idea that we need old people to lead and we need to do this. And I think we need to try to entrust youth. We need to try to show them that their voice matters, that they don't have to have extreme voices to go on social media, that they don't need to be experts. But it's about just this situation, like right here, that I think if there's more of this, I think if there is more of listening to people on a level and realizing that the opinions of a 24-year-old are as valid as a 70-year-old, and whether you're blue or red or anything in between, that all of these matter, and trying to put them together, I think is very important. At the moment, I think we are too selective in our voices. And in bringing you people together, it makes me realize, and I want people to know that you're not influencers, you're not experts, you're not people that I've sounded out for your political opinions or things like that. You are generally just citizens of South Korea that have come together, and you're not even sure, I guess, before you start, of other people's political opinions. You're like, oh my God. But I think this shows that it works, this kind of thing. So I think it's about entrusting youth and making sure their voice feels like it counts. Even if you don't win, you at least feel, well, I said my piece, and that's important.
I actually don't really feel hopeful about Koreans' democratic future. I feel like to be hopeful again, we kind of actually have to change the entire candidates. It's like because the candidates aim for division, aim for like polarization. So I feel like we have to change the people that who can stand from us. And I also got this idea that it would be nice to just erase all the colors that people have and just, see the policies or see the human and not just judging with the colors, so that they can have their honest opinions about who should rule our country.
I'm getting lots of vibes of Tommy Douglas Mouseland from you and the things that I've taught you in politics, Jenny.
Yes.
But yeah, removing the colours and just basing it on the character.
So speaking of color, right? So one of the questions of this podcast was, why does this fear of expressing your true political color exist? And I've been trying to figure out why. But I can't think of obvious answers, but they're not sufficient answers. So I genuinely want to ask you guys why it exists. And if it is, or is it even fear? Or is it not fear? But why does this uneasy feeling exist? Why do you think it is?
I think that we just want to avoid conflict, as we said before. And if we are not fearful or if we are not avoiding conflict, we can just talk, just like we said. We might have whole different opinions about Korean society, or we can have same. And I'd like to highlight that the political view is not a dot on left or right side. I think it's a quite a stain. It has no shape or thing. You can make the same point with the people that you have totally different political view or totally different voting, but you can share something if you talk together, and you can understand each other why you chose that perspective or why you view the world as that way. So the reason that we just fear or avoid talking about politics is that the fear of communication, maybe.
I also want to approach this in a cultural way, because Korea is one of the most confusionist society in the world, and we are educated not to actually form our own opinions and not to talk back to people, to elder people. And we don't really, as we grow up, we don't really learn how to express our own thoughts and to stand up and speak up. So as becoming a young adult, we don't really know how to stand up. It's people say we have to stand up and you guys go and speak your voice and form your opinions and everything. But we're yes, we know we have to do that, but how? We're wondering how to do that. So I think it's somewhat fear and also kind of not really, it's afraid. I feel like that.
I go a step even further and say that the cultural sense of conforming to society, and so staying in line with what others think with you, and that compounded with the fear of you standing out from your peers or your community.
Yeah.
It's I believe there's a phenomenon called tall poppy syndrome, and so if a poppy flower grows higher than its other, it gets cut down. So that's the kind of fear associated with expressing your political views.
Yeah.
But also more so in the sense, just like what Jenny said, it's become, if you've conformed for so long, then what do you actually believe in? Is what you think in the current moment the view of the group or your own group, or yourself? So yeah.
Let me add one thing to this, which is I agree with all of you, the culture, the harmony, the sociology, and also the history. Because Jenny mentioned that in modern society, people say, voice your opinion, speak out, speak honestly, but you're not trained. You have to have this real big paradox or this contradictory thing of being a good Confucian student, of shutting up and studying, but then also selling yourself and standing out. Through a lot of the 20th century, to express your political opinion in South Korea could end up with you getting a knock on the door or being taken to Namsan or something like this. And so maybe your parents or maybe your grandparents or people a couple of generations older than you, they would have been raised not to let slip their political opinions, because when they're drinking, and I've heard stories from this from people that live here during the 60s and 70s, that you get drunk and you say something bad about Park Chung-hee at a table, and you could get a knock on the door from the police the next day. And so history has meant that people here haven't expressed themselves through those reasons, and that would have passed on, like the reason that you bow to people and take things with two hands and use because culture is passed down through generation. And what your parents have experienced, that kind of silence in social areas, will have been passed down to you consciously or unconsciously. I'm not saying that this is the only reason, but I think it's one. And if all of a sudden you went to North Korea today and you you showed all the North Koreans like Kim Jong-un being taken away, like we're taking him away, we're going to put him in a room, you're completely safe now, you can say what you want, I don't think North Korean people would suddenly express their political views and opinions freely and willingly, because they will have been conditioned, and it takes a long time to open the mind is the wrong way, but to feel safe to express yourself where you won't fear repercussions. So I think you've had this kind of intergenerational culture being passed down to you guys, and now you're slowly speaking up more. And then for me, it's what you pass down to the next generation. What values will the elementary school children and my children, Edward and Elizabeth, when they look at you guys, what are you going to pass down to them? Are you still going to be quiet? Are you going to shout from the rooftops and graffiti the buildings? Are you going to burn things? What you pass down now becomes important. So I think the silence, one of the reasons, is history and politics.
Okay, the reason that I ask is that, so right now I'm reading Golok Archipelago, and I'm learning a lot from this book. So this is a book that kind of details out the Soviet oppression and the formation of the totalitarian state during the early 20th century. And as far as I can tell, one conclusion, the most important one that I can draw from it, is that truth undergirds a civil society. So society has to be based on true communication and truth. And for truth to be communicated, the truth has to be, at least in part, coming from our true identity. And we also, earlier, we agreed to the idea that our political belief is in some way allied with our true identity, right? And if we can't express our political opinions, and if we can't discuss it in a rational and a democratic manner, then we are not discussing the true color of our identity. Then we are not serving the truth. And if we're not serving the truth, then civil society cannot sustain. This is what occurred to me, and that's why I ask everyone. And yeah,
very well said.
I think it's an important thing to know.
Well noted. Yeah, a great book as well. Not an easy read, but it's nice to know that young people are still finding value in Alexander Scholz and it's in work and the things that he's done there. As we bring this towards the end, if you could send one message to the new president, a question, a message, if President Lee Jae-myung were in this room right now, if he was sat there, what would you ask him? What would you say to him? What message would you give him? Mine would be this. This is a really weird question, but mine would be this. How you doing? You all right? It would just be that. And I would try to look in his eyes and see how he responded. Mine would just be, you all right? You good? That would be it. As a human. What would you ask him? What message would you send him?
I actually wrote like a short letter to him. So I'll just like read my letter.
Please.
So, dear President Lee,
Oh.
Wrote it later.
so first of all, congratulations on becoming the 21st President of Korea. I truly hope and believe that you will do your best for our country and for the people. My biggest wish is that you don't lose sight of what really matters. Please don't get blinded by the power and the privilege that comes with your position. So instead, I hope you can make the right decisions for Korea, not only for the present, but for the future as well. I hope you can see the bigger picture and unite people. I hope you can lead with both logic and charisma when needed, but also with empathy and care for the citizens you serve. I know that being a leader is incredibly hard, and I don't expect you to be perfect. But since you're the president now, I believe there will be times that when you need to sacrifice for the greater good. Please strengthen our democracy, protect the values that matter, and please help to build a better world for all of us and for the future us. Thank you.
Love from Jenny.
From Jenny.
It's hard to top that, guys. Jenny wrote a letter to the president. It'd be interesting. Have you posted that anywhere?
No.
No.
As a person to person. Okay, so obviously no one's perfect, right? No one's good always, but I at least try to be the best version of myself every day. So I try to be good, and I hope he does too.
Very inspirational.
Thank you.
I can imagine what, like if we had some 70-year-old people in here from Daegu, one message to the president, what would it be? It would be very different from Jenny's letter. I'm just hearing it in my head right now.
It just came up to my mind.
Yeah, you know, it's good. It's good. Yunso, Andrew, any message for your new president?
You go first.
Sure. First of all, I'm not a presidential candidate, so I'm in no position to lecture anybody. And I don't really think I have the knowledge required to run a country well. So I would like to borrow the words of a different influential president in history from Abraham Lincoln, and where he described democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And so what I believe this means for Korea is I hope that President Lee is coming from a position where he cares first and foremost for the people, and that he's running the country through nominees that actually do share this mindset with the people's interest at heart.
First of all, I voted for you. And please remember the things happened last winter. And please show us with your act that you promised. Thank you.
That was rather brave, Yunso. Revealing your voting. Yeah, they're brilliant. Any recommendations? Did you see that question?
I did see it.
Yeah,
at
okay.
the end. This is gonna be a bit of a controversial thing, but
Woo!
it's not like something novel, but Animal Farm by George Orwell. I think, especially in this day and age, it's good to take a good look at what happened in the past, and not to spoil anything, but Animal Farm is an allegory for the communism, right? So basically, a quote that comes to mind is, "Power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely." So not just for average citizens, but politicians as well. It's good to take a look and see if your priorities are set straight. Yeah.
Lord Acton, his famous adage about power. Animal Farm saddens me so much when I read it. You're reading about like horses and animals, and I'm like, oh my god, it's a really powerful thing, more than statistics, or it moves you more than a newspaper report might about a tragedy somewhere. Yeah, it's a great book. I won't speak too long, but I'm sometimes saddened that Korean people, they have to read Animal Farm and 1984 at a very young age at school, and it turns them off George Orwell, because they've read it and they're like, oh, that sucks. But I think you need to revisit Orwell every 5 years. And I do that as well, by the way, because the book doesn't change, but you do. And you get more and more out of Orwell. I think Orwell still matters so incredibly. Yunso, any recommendations?
I brought another recommendations, but a book popped up in my mind right away. Speaking of George Orwell, I wanted to recommend The Brave New World, because there are so much of contents nowadays, and we get to be far away from the political stuffs because we have so much thing to get entertained from. So we don't really get to see the truth or even our own opinion. So I think that it's a good book to really be cautious about having your own opinion. And the original recommendation that I wanted to introduce was an idea that I learned in my university when I was a freshman. It's hating is easy, which means like if you see someone like in the short term and you get to hate that person, that's very easy. But you double take that person and think again and again, you will maybe understand that person and you will get to see the reason and you may resonate with that person even. So I get to forget this very often, but I try to remember it as often as possible.
Very good. There's a wonderful book called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, which draws comparisons between George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, 멋진 신세계. And it's really interesting because he says we're going closer towards a Brave New World, but that both of them have something to say. And it's a really nice direct comparison. And I need to check my memory, but if memory serves, Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, they both knew each other and they were sending their books to their English teacher to say, look, my version of the future is right. No, my version of the future is right. They were competing authors at the same time who knew each other, who were both trying to demonstrate that they saw the future the best. I think Orwell's writing is superior, far superior. Aldous Huxley's ideas, Brave New World.
His prose is just clean.
Yeah, it's clean. Aldous Huxley's ideas, though, with soma, with drugs, with sex, very relevant to today. Jenny?
For me, first of all, I would like to recommend the video that you showed us, the Mouseland. So it's also an allegory, like Tommy Douglas made a speech about it, and then they made a video. So I think that reflects a lot about Korean democracy and politics right now. And another video that I found on YouTube is called Dinner for Few. So it's like an animated short film, and there's like no words in it. It's all animated, and when you see it, at first you feel confused. But I kind of recommend you guys to see it at least twice. So every time you see it, it feels different. So I think you can think about democracy a bit more with this video.
Well, so I guess today we're talking about books, and if I had to recommend one book, I would definitely recommend Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Well, this is actually a book that I wanted to recommend in my last podcast, but then I couldn't, so I'm doing it today. And I think his message in this book profoundly resonates with people in modern days, the people in Korea, people everywhere. And I think the value of this book will not die forever, because in this book he claims that people are not mere piano keys. Everyone has freedom, and everyone has this desire and will to manifest the best version of themselves to the world. And I think this message kind of links to the main message of the books that you guys mentioned, Brave New World and the George Orwell's work. And yeah, I think it's relevant in that manner, and it was a great read for me. Yeah.
Testing my memory here, I think the first line of that is, "I'm a sick, twisted, and unattractive
Something
man."
like that.
Something like that, yeah? Yeah. My memory still works a little bit. Thank you so much for doing this. This was, I feel so, in a weird way, I feel so proud of you all. But I'm very grateful, not just for your time, but for your honesty, for listening to each other, for showing what democracy can and should be. Guys, thank you very much. Ooh, that's it.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Really, thank you.